Wendigo. The Wendigo, or Wendigo, also Wetigo, is a mythological man-eating creature or evil spirit from the folklore of the Native American Algonquin tribes based in the northern forests of Nova Scotia, the east coast of Canada, and the Great Lakes region of Canada. The Wendigo is described as a monster with some characteristics of a human, or as a spirit who has possessed a human being and made them become monstrous. Its influence is said to invoke acts of murder, insatiable greed, cannibalism, and the cultural taboos against such behaviours. The Wendigo is part of the traditional belief system of a number of Algonquin-speaking peoples, including the Ojibwe, the Saulteaux, the Cree, the Naskapi, and the Innu. Although descriptions can vary somewhat, common to all these cultures is the view that the Wendigo is a malevolent, cannibalistic, supernatural being. They were strongly associated with winter, the north, coldness, famine, and starvation. Basil H. Johnston, an Ojibwe teacher and scholar from Ontario, gives a description of the Wendigo. The Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulled tightly over its bones. With its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion the ash grey of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets, the Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it had were tattered and bloody. Unclean and suffering from suppuration of the flesh, the Wendigo gave off a strange and eerie odour of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption. In Ojibwe, Eastern Cree, West Main Swampy Cree, Naskapi, and Innu lore, Wendigos are often described as giants that are many times larger than human beings, a characteristic absent from myths in other Algonquin cultures. Whenever a Wendigo ate another person, it would grow in proportion to the meal it had just eaten, so it could never be full. Therefore, Wendigos are portrayed as simultaneously gluttonous and extremely thin due to starvation. The Wendigo is seen as the embodiment of gluttony, greed, and excess. Never satisfied after killing and consuming one person, they are constantly searching for new victims. In some traditions, humans overpowered by greed could turn into Wendigos. The myth thus served as a method of encouraging cooperation and moderation. Other sources say Wendigos were created when a human resorted to cannibalism to survive. Humans could also turn into Wendigos by being in contact with them for too long. Among the Assiniboine, the Cree, and the Ojibwe, a satirical ceremonial dance is sometimes performed during the times of famine to reinforce the seriousness of the Wendigo taboo. The ceremony, known as Windigu Kanzimuin, was performed during times of famine and involved wearing masks and dancing backwards around a drum. The last known Wendigo ceremony conducted in the United States was at Lake Windigo of Star Island of Cass Lake, located within the Leech Lake Indian Reservation in northern Minnesota. In historical accounts of Wendigo psychosis, it has been reported that humans became possessed by the Wendigo spirit after being in a situation of needing food and having no other choice besides cannibalism. In 1661, the Jesuit Relations reported, "What caused us greater concern was the intelligence that met us upon entering the lake, namely that the men deputied by our conductor for the purpose of summoning the nations to the North Sea and assigning them a rendezvous were they to await our coming, had met their death the previous winter in a very strange manner. Those poor men, according to the report given us, were seized with an ailment unknown to us, but not very unusual among the people we were seeking. They are afflicted with neither lunacy, hypochondria, nor frenzy, but have a combination of all these species of disease, which affects their imaginations and causes them a more than canine hunger. This makes them so ravenous for human flesh that they pounce upon women, children, and even upon men, like veritable werewolves, and devour them voraciously, without being able to appease or glut their appetite, ever seeking fresh prey, and the more greedily, the more they eat. This ailment attacked our deputies, and, as death is the sole remedy among these simple people for checking such acts of murder, they were slain in order to stay the course of their madness." One of the more famous cases of Wendigo psychosis reported involved a Plains Cree trapper from Alberta named Swift Runner. During the winter of 1878, Swift Runner and his family were starving, and his eldest son died. 25 miles away from emergency food supplies at a Hudson's Bay company post, Swift Runner butchered and ate his wife and 5 remaining children. Given that he resorted to cannibalism so near to food supplies and that he killed and consumed the remains of all those present, it was revealed that Swift Runner's was not a case of pure cannibalism as a last resort to avoid starvation, but rather of a man who had turned into a Wendigo. He eventually confessed and was executed by authorities at Fort Saskatchewan. Another well-known case involving Wendigos was that of Jack Fiddler, an OG Cree chief and medicine man known for his powers at defeating Wendigos. In some cases, this entailed killing people who had transformed. As a result, in 1907, Fiddler and his brother Joseph were arrested by the Canadian authorities for homicide. Jack committed suicide, but Joseph was tried and sentenced to life in prison. He ultimately was granted a pardon, but died 3 days later in jail before receiving news of his pardon.